Today we are testing and reviewing the Fujifilm XF 50-140 f2.8 RLM OIS WR lens. This telephoto zoom lens is designed for Fujifilm's X-mount cameras and is primarily intended for photography. However, it can also be used for video if you're a hybrid shooter like myself. I often find myself adding a diffusion filter to this lens though, as it is extremely sharp, and sometimes that's not the desired effect for your image. So it's been 21 days since our last incident on Earth, but I have noticed that since our last excursion to the outside world testing the 16mm Fuji lens, it's exhibiting strange behavior, randomly floating. So we have had to secure all our gear. Just a friendly note to watch out for this if you've been outside recently. Anyway, let's get into it. This review is entirely independent. The lens was paid for out of pocket, and I have no obligations to any entity. However, I highly encourage you to watch other review videos to get the most comprehensive view of the product possible. I actually really like this lens. However, I seem to only use it on very special occasions where its size is worth the extra effort to carry it around. This is something I knew before purchasing, but ignored, thinking that people were exaggerating because it's smaller than a 70-200. Yet, I was quite shocked at how often I leave it behind due to its size and weight. I don't think that should be the case though. If you're serious about it, you'll carry the burden of that weight even if it is just to get that one shot. Now, I've personally found it to be exceptional for landscape photography, as it allows you to maintain that sense of depth that always distorts when you go to the wider angle. It is compatible with Fujifilm's X-mount cameras, which have an APS-C sensor size. This means it has a focal range equivalent to 76-213mm in full-frame terms, and a constant maximum aperture of f2.8 throughout the zoom range, which is equivalent to f4.2 in full-frame terms. The minimum aperture is f22. The costs vary quite a bit, but you can find the most up-to-date prices in the links in the description below. Most of the time, it hovers around 1,500 euros, which is not cheap, but not too expensive for what it offers. It is a high-performance telephoto zoom that can handle a variety of situations, from portraits to sports to wildlife. It is well built, weather-resistant, fast-focusing, sharp, stabilized, and versatile, making it one of the best lenses in Fujifilm's lineup. I generally recommend it for someone's kit, but do consider if you will use it. I often find myself going for a 56mm prime, as that also stabilizes on most gimbals, whereas this one proves to be quite challenging in that area. The accessories you receive with this product are of good quality. It includes a petal-shaped lens hood that securely attaches to the front of the lens. This hood helps prevent stray light from entering and decreasing image contrast. It also has an optional opening for adjusting filters, which is incredibly useful. However, in terms of glare, it doesn't suffer much from this issue. I often leave the hood behind as it blocks the focus ring when stored and makes the lens a bit too big for my liking when attached the other way. There is also a tripod collar that can be removed or rotated as needed. It's especially handy when you're using a body with no reinforcements around the mount like the XT30, as the weight really does start to flex that mount and it becomes rather concerning after a while. The filter thread size is 72mm, which is pretty standard. The build quality and design are excellent. It's made from fully metallic components with rubber textures and feels solid and well balanced in the hand. It features a weather-resistant construction that can withstand dust, moisture, and low temperatures. It has 3 rings on the barrel. And as a testament to Fuji's design, all 3 of these have a different texture, so you can always be quite certain which one you're turning. The zoom ring is smooth, precise, and has a rubber texture to improve your grip. The focus ring is also smooth and responsive, although it's non-linear, which means that if you pull focus extremely fast, the distance will be greater than if you pull slowly. This can be problematic for video, as it doesn't have any hard stops, making focus pulling a little difficult as you often overshoot and have to reset the position where your marks are set. An internal focus puller on Fujifilm cameras would be much appreciated here. Although at 140mm, it displays some pretty heavy focus breathing. which may be unsuitable for some video projects. At 50mm, this improves quite significantly. It's important to realize that we see these characteristics as flaws in many instances, but they can always be used as a method for telling the story you wish to tell. So it's mostly about knowing what your lens does and what you want from your image. Essentially, there's no right or wrong. The aperture ring is clicked in 1/3 stop increments, and it has an A position for automatic aperture control. In any case, I've often complimented Fujifilm designs as they somehow make you appreciate the art a lot more. That is, of course, psychological, yet I thought it was worth mentioning. The focusing performance of this lens is incredibly good, rarely missing shots, and being able to quickly bring objects into focus that I couldn't even perceive at first without any searching. It has a minimum focus distance of 1 meter, which can put you in some awkward positions. It has a fast and quiet autofocus system that uses linear motors and an inner focusing mechanism. The autofocus is accurate and reliable in most situations, but in this particular lens it is mostly limited by the body you put it on. On the Fuji X-H2S, it is one of the fastest and best compared to the rest of the kit. It has a 9-blade rounded diaphragm that creates a smooth and pleasing bokeh effect. The optical design uses 23 elements in 16 groups, including 5 extra low dispersion elements and 1 super extra low dispersion element. The lens also has a nano GI coating that reduces lens flare and ghosting. Okay, so jumping into the test results here at 50mm f2.8, we have pretty good center sharpness. We do see some ghosting in the corners. Stopping down to f4, center sharpness does not really improve, but the corner sharpness gets a little bit better. As for f5.6, no real improvements in the center, but the corner sharpness does improve quite significantly. Then stopping down to f8, the sharpness is pretty good, and the corner sharpness is at its best up to f11, as the sharpness stays the same in the corners. Sharpness is pretty good at f16. We do see some diffraction starting to creep in, and this is across the frame, so corner sharpness also decreases. At f22, this diffraction becomes a little hefty. I don't recommend shooting at this aperture unless it's absolutely necessary. On the other hand, at 70mm f2.8, the center sharpness is incredibly good, and the corner sharpness as well. Stopping down to f4.0 shows minimal improvement, and the corner sharpness is pretty good as well. There is still a tad bit of ghosting at f5.6, but the sharpness is very good here. At f8, the sharpness is again pretty much the same, and the corners are excellent here. This is probably the best aperture to shoot landscapes. At f11, we start to see a tad bit of diffraction creeping in, and this can be seen in the corners as well. It gets a little misty at f16 as we see pretty hefty diffraction, so we lose some contrast in the image. At f22, diffraction is pretty bad, pretty misty, pretty soft and blurry, so I wouldn't recommend shooting at f22. As for 140mm and f2.8, the sharpness is incredibly good with a contrasty image, and the corner sharpness is also excellent. There is a little bit of ghosting there, but not too bad. At f4, we see a very minimal improvement in contrast and sharpness in the center, and still some minimal ghosting in the corners. At f5.6, it stays about the same. The ghosting in the corners has practically disappeared. Stopping down to f8. This is where you'll see the best image quality overall, with almost no ghosting in the corners and excellent sharpness. At f11 there is actually an improvement, which we didn't see at the previous focal lengths, and the corners are also pretty good. So I'm thinking f11 is probably the best aperture at 140mm. At f16 you do see some ghosting coming into the frame, and overall it gets pretty soft. There is also a decrease in contrast. Stopping all the way down to f22, I would pretty much stay away from this aperture because diffraction starts to degrade the image quite significantly, and it's overall a softer image than what you'd be able to get with f11. As you may have been able to tell from the sharpness testing, there are some fairly heavy pincushion distortions at all focal lengths, alongside some vignetting which disappears as you stop down. I was quite surprised to see that chromatic aberrations on this lens were also extremely well controlled. Comparing it to the Viltrox 56mm F1.4, you can see how clinical and free of any aberrations this lens is. So I guess this is why Fuji has never upgraded it. It's as close as you can get to a perfect image. Again, it's up to you if you're into that. The image stabilization is another highlight. It has an optical image stabilization system that can compensate for up to 5 stops of camera shake. This is very useful for handheld shooting at long focal lengths or in low light conditions. The image stabilization works well with both stills and video, and it's compatible with Fujifilm's in-body image stabilization on some models like the XH2S. This stabilization system does make some rather strange noises. Nothing you'd be able to pick up if you were using an external microphone. However, you will actively hear it when turning the camera on and off and feel it at the same time, almost as if an element is falling into place. It's nothing to worry about, but you may freak out a little when you use it for the first time and assume something is very wrong. In terms of bokeh, it produces very clean out of focus backgrounds without much distortions or character, so overall very clinical. In my opinion, this is very boring, but it's well suited to more corporate work where clients may not understand the somewhat more niche yet fun aspects of optics that have extreme amounts of character. Since this lens has an internal zoom, it doesn't suffer from any front element wobble, which I absolutely love. I wish other models like the 16-55 would have followed a similar design philosophy here. It would be the perfect combination. A 16-50mm f2.8 lens with internal zoom and in-body image stabilization alongside this, but sadly it hasn't happened yet, so my OCD is still triggered every time I start thinking about buying that 16-55 f2.8. Well, that was it for today. If you liked this video, consider checking out this next one about the 18-55, which is a decent standard zoom for the Fuji system. Don't forget to subscribe, it helps me out a lot. Hopefully we'll see you in the next one.